Morning, hello, and welcome to our first live We Are Sunderland briefing of the day. Apologies for the slight delay there. We were just trying to have a fight to work out how to pronounce Lucharel Gertruda's name after one of two pretty major Sunderland transfer developments first thing this morning. It has been a pretty mad summer, Scott. So I guess the dramatic last 12 hours or so is pretty fitting to what this summer has been all about.
I was going to say, is anything going on? Like, is there any reason we're jumping on here live? It started last night, didn't it, with the Marko Gyay stuff? I mean, yeah, let's start there. So, obviously, there were rumours in the afternoon yesterday, weren't there, of Chelsea potentially looking to recall Gyay from Sunderland. My initial reaction at the time was, well, I just can't see Sunderland agreeing to that. Once it became clear there wasn't an automatic recall clause, you thought, well, we've got just over a day left of the window. Sunderland haven't actively been looking for another striker in the last few days. Yes, we know that they still have been wanting a wide attacker, but not necessarily a striker. So my initial reaction was, well, that won't happen. It obviously became clear late last night, it was going to happen. Sunderland were going to load it. So then you thought, well, there's got to be irons in the fire. And clearly overnight, in terms of an attack, we'll start there first. It's become obvious that it's Brian Brobbey that has been the iron in the fire. And things moving pretty quickly. Deal agreed with Ajax, 20 million euros up front. Another, about 2.5, I think, of potential add-ons. Another big commitment financially from Sunderland this summer. You've got to say that. Reports in the Dutch media, interestingly, that Brobbey is going to have a medical in Amsterdam. He had been given permission to come over to the UK. That's normally the way Sunderland would tend to do things, although obviously they were doing some medicals out in Paris, weren't they, earlier in the summer? I think that's purely and simply just to avoid the risk of anything going wrong with travel or anything like that. So Brobbey will have his medical in Amsterdam. I'm led to understand that the terms of the deal are pretty much already there. The contract's largely agreed. So, never say never on deadline day, but I think it would take a pretty major hitch now for something to go wrong with that. And it's a big old deal for Sunderland, isn't it? It's a permanent contract for a Dutch international striker. Like I say, a hefty financial commitment there. A player who, he hasn't played for Ajax this season because I think that the sense was always that he was going to be leaving at some point. But, at various points in the last few years, he's been a key part of that Ajax team. I'm just checking now. 98 starts and 70 substitute appearances for Ajax, 54 goals.
I was going to get to that.
He was
vast
Ajax
experience there.
Yeah, he was their player of the year in 23-24.
Yeah. And what you would say with this is fair play to Sunderland, because this is kind of the worst case scenario, to have the rug pulled from underneath you so late in a window like that, to lose a player like that. Fair play, like Gyay. Fair play to Sunderland for being able to react as quickly, for having the network, for having the contacts, for having the deals in place, really, not deals in place, but you know what I mean, for having that there to be able to react so quickly into what is, because deals are difficult to do at this stage of the window. But how often have we heard people say to us, especially at Sunderland, striker deals are even more difficult to do. So fair play for the way they've done this.
I agree with kind of most of what you've said there. The only thing, like the rug pulled under them, I think is wrong, because the only reason the rug was pulled from under them was because Sunderland agreed to do it. And the only reason they agreed to do it was because they'd already put the groundwork in, put their feelers out, and knew the Brobbey deal was going to happen. So, I mean, clearly, nothing's blooming clear at the minute, is it? But putting the pieces of the jigsaw together, what has happened, I suspect, is that Chelsea have come to Sunderland and say, look, we want Gyay back. We're willing to give, there's got to be a financial element to that deal.
I was going to say that. Will Sunderland have been compensated?
There has to be a financial element to that deal. Sunderland didn't have to agree to that. So I think two things have happened. One, they've been offered money by Chelsea, which, to all intents and purposes, you're getting money for nothing, aren't you? That's hard to turn down. Secondly, is it too harsh to suggest that they've seen Gyay now for a month? They've watched him every day in training, Lebris and the rest of the coaching team. They've obviously seen him start in the League Cup game against Huddersfield last week, when admittedly he scored. They've seen him come off the bench in Premier League games. It's hard to escape the conclusion that they've looked at it and thought, do you know what? I think we can get better here. I think we can get a better option. That Gyay's perhaps not the player we thought he was going to be. Yes, he can still do a job for us, but actually, the other strikers that we were considering earlier in the summer, maybe it's time to revisit one of them, because they've got the potential to have a higher ceiling than what Gyay can offer us on loan this year. They must have concluded that Brobbey has the potential to offer them more than keeping Gyay for the whole of the rest of the season would have done. Time will see with that, won't it? But as you say, they've absolutely been decisive, and they've got in there and got the deal done really quickly, which has enabled them to say to Chelsea, right, we'll agree to what you're proposing. You can have Gyay back.
And I mean, straight away, the fact you're signing a permanent player rather than having a loan player is an obvious advantage. But it is going to be a quiz question of 20 years down the line, and probably not just one. Who are the two strikers who signed for Sunderland in successive windows on loan from Premier League clubs and didn't make a single start between them? So Gyay returns having played 13 minutes, no league starts, did play in the EFL.
Played in the cup, but not in the league,
Yeah. And obviously Jayden Danns, who arrived in January and had the loan move, continued with the loan move despite the fact he'd got injured. So they're both players of the past for Sunderland. Now, what about defence then? So Luke Gertruida. Now, first things first. Apologies if I've absolutely messed that up. But is that the end then of the John Lukumi pursuit? The summer-long John Lukumi pursuit? My
understanding is that yes, it is. As long as the Gertruida deal goes through, that will end Sunderland's interest in Lukumi. And I think, again, this is a move that Sunderland have the speed at which Sunderland are able to move transfer-wise has been the key to this one, because Lukumi's been their number one target. I don't think we can shy away from that, and they've not been able to get him over the line. They've tried pretty much everything. They've thrown money at it. They've got the player on side. They've done everything. Ultimately, Bologna have stuck to their stance that we can't afford to lose him. We've already lost one of our major centre-halves this summer. We're not going to sell Lukumi. It's not going to happen. Once that became clear yesterday, over the weekend anyway, that there was, that wasn't going to budge. They were not going to get Lukumi done. So then it's okay, what's the next best option? They decided that Gertruida was. The problem there was that he was going to Marseille. There was a deal pretty much done for him to go to Marseille. Everything had been agreed between the two clubs. What hadn't been agreed was Gertruida's personal terms. He hadn't done a medical, all that side of it. Sunderland have gone in there and in the space of less than 24 hours have done the deal with the club, with Leipzig, and persuaded Gertruida that Marseille is not the place for him. Sunderland is. So again, fair play for that, the way that they've done that business. It's an initial loan deal, but there is an agreement in place for a permanent transfer next summer. Let me just check the exact terms of that, which I've got written down here. I think we're talking about 20 million euros, aren't we? 23 million euro permanent deal, I'm led to understand, is what's in place for next summer. So, I can really see the value in Sunderland doing this. They get a year to have a look at him. They get a chance to get him in. Yes, there's a loan fee to be paid up front, but it's an initial 1-year deal. It's a chance to look at him. But if everything works to plan, if Sunderland are happy with him and if Gertruida is happy with Sunderland, they're the two things that would have to happen. Then Sunderland can trigger the clause and the price is already in place. It won't go up. It'll be 23 million euros. But Sunderland do have the right to walk away from that next summer if for whatever reason it doesn't happen. Centre-half, can play at right-back as well, which I think is another big appeal because we've said, where does Sunderland go if something happens to Trey Hume? Yes, there are options there, but there probably isn't a real obvious one. Well, Gertruida has played quite a bit of football at right-back. He is primarily a centre-half. And again, a Dutch international. He was part of the Dutch squad at the Euros last summer. He was coming off the bench in their most recent World Cup qualifier in June. Replaced Denzel Dumfries in that game off the bench. So Again, a player with a real pedigree and, has the potential to really offer Sunderland something as part of that defence. And we know that that's an area that Sunderland, even before the Dan Ballard injury, Sunderland wanted to do something with it. But the fact that Ballard, has suffered more setbacks, we don't really know what state Adjei Lacey is going to be when he comes back. We don't really know what state Luke O'Nien is going to be when he comes back. Yes, Marko Gyay went in and showed what he could do at the weekend, but Labris has wanted another centre-half there all summer. Looks like he's getting one.
It's just after 10 a.m, by the way. We're recording this live, obviously. Get in touch in the comments if there's anything you want us to discuss. But we will try and jump on again later and wrap things up if and when things progress throughout the day. Deadline day, obviously 7 p.m. today. And we've talked about those two transfers there. But what about wide attack? Because you talked there about the summer-long pursuit, really, of a central defender. Well, it's been pretty clear for the last few weeks that Sunderland are also in the market for a wide attacker. Where do things stand there?
So, defender was the bigger priority. I think internally, and certainly from Labris, with everything that's been going on with Sunderland's defenders, getting another defender in was the number one priority. Clearly, when the decision was made for Gyay to go back, getting a replacement there was an absolute priority. Although I keep coming back to, if Sunderland hadn't been 99% sure that something was there, they wouldn't have agreed to that Gyay recall. So they were the two immediate priorities kind of over the weekend. A wide attacker is a want. Sunderland definitely want one, and I'm led to believe that talks are ongoing in a couple of different areas there, but not as advanced as the defensive stuff has obviously been. Clearly not as advanced as the Brobbey stuff has been. Now, with Brobbey coming in, you've got your forwards in. Brobbey is really a centre forward, but I'm led to believe from speaking to a couple of people that he can play, in a wider position if needed, although it's probably not his real strength. Similar in that respect, probably to Isidore, isn't it? That we've seen Isidore can play wide, but I think we all feel probably fundamentally he's best going through the middle. Sunderland still want to do a wide attacker, but as we're sitting here at 10:05, I have had no indications anyway that anything is really close. So I think that's one that they're going to be pursuing in the next 2 or 3 hours to try and get something in place. Realistically, if it goes much beyond that, then with obviously the deadline having been brought forward to 7 o'clock this year, there'll be a point at which Sunderland would probably have to admit defeat in that. And that would be disappointing, but I don't think Labris or anyone else would see it as a disaster in any way, shape or form, given all the other business that's gone on this summer. So it's still a desire, but as we sit here, I don't think there's anything absolutely imminent.
Thanks to Richard for this question. Are there any updates regarding outgoings? Rumours suggested Roberts was subject to a move to the Championship. I think Derby were the team that were heavily linked over the weekend.
They're not the only one, but
assume this will be only be entertained if we find a replacement. But we'll start with Roberts, but there are several others, aren't there? Now, clearly, we don't need to go over the obvious players here, the obvious kind of bomb squad, really. It's been pretty clear right from the off this summer. They're available, they can go. We all know the players we're on about. But then there are a cluster of first-team players whose positions are interested. Roberts is one of them now. Jensen Seelt, we've talked about again and again over the weekend. You do wonder about a player like Niall Huggins and whether he'd benefit from a loan, given the defensive arrivals and the fact that they've brought in a couple of players now, or they're going to have brought in a couple of players who can play right back as well as centre half. So where do we stand on all of them? But we'll start with Roberts. Yeah,
so I think Richard's probably right. I think Roberts will almost certainly be contingent on someone coming in. Although the only caveat I would put to that is if Roberts starts really banging the door down and saying, I want to leave, I think that changes Sunderland's position. Now, my understanding over the weekend was that hadn't happened. And that, yes, the interest is there and Roberts is aware of it and he's potentially interested in it, but isn't at the point where he's banging on the door saying, let me leave. I don't think I'm going to be playing here. I want to go. Roberts' stance all summer has been, I want to fight for my place. Now, obviously, the season has started and we're only 3 games in. I've got to say that, but it is looking like it's going to be hard for him to play or start regularly anyway if everyone stays fit. So I think there would be interest there from Roberts, but I think like I said, if Sunderland can get a wide attacker, then they will be open to letting Roberts go, definitely. If they don't, then I think the only way Roberts goes is, as I say, if he starts really agitating and saying, I want this move, this is what I want to do.
Seal's an interesting.
Seal, sorry, go on.
Yeah, because the message to me last week with Seal was it's not necessarily related to, or directly, purely only related to players coming in. Clearly, there's a knock-on effect there. Clearly, that's going to have an impact. Sunderland would not risk themselves leaving themselves short. But what they deem more important is the development of the player. So even if they want to keep Sealed in an ideal world, the chances are by the time you get O'Nien back, by the time Ballard's back, Elise is still to come back, then all the signings, you might be in a position where Seal doesn't kick a ball again until January. We talked about it on last week's vid and pod. Getting knocked out the Carabao Cup was a bit of a blow for a number of players because that was a guaranteed game in a few weeks' time, wasn't it? So where do we stand now with Seal? I've always thought a loans felt likely there. What do you think?
I agree, because while I know exactly what you're saying, that Sunderland's view has always been, it's not just simply a case of one comes in, one comes out. It's about the development of the player. Well, realistically, Seal's development is negatively impacted by Gertrude coming in, isn't it? You've got a 34-time Dutch international against a player who, yes, is really promising, but, is I think we'd all agree, at a level below that at the moment. So, while it's not the be-all and end-all, I think the reality is that if Gertrude gets over the line, then that will make Sunderland much more willing to loan out Sealed. We know that Nijmegen have an offer on the table. You would imagine that would probably appeal to Sealed, go back to his homeland, get regular football there. I think that'll happen. I think Sealed will leave on loan before the window closes, provided that there's no hiccups with Gertrude.
And just to wrap up, we will be back later in the day. As I say, we'll do another one of those and we'll shout up on, you'll get a notification if you subscribe to the channel. So do that if you haven't subscribed already, but we'll also shout up on socials. Away from the transfers, big win Saturday for all the reasons we talked about before the game.
Absolutely massive. Yeah, absolutely massive. And the manner of the win as well, the fact that Sunderland had gone one goal down, the fact that, Brentford had their tails up and all of that. To get back level would have been a decent outcome, I think, given the way the game had gone. Obviously, the penalty save from Roffers as well. But then to win it in the manner that they did with Isidore is just absolutely massive heading into this international break. 6 points from 9. Brilliant start to the season. More progress, positive in terms of transfers today. Sunderland... Nobody could have asked for more, could they, in terms of backing for the team and the support from above this summer. It is continuing through today. As I say, we're seeing with the deals that are taking place. Things have started well on the pitch so far. So, loads and loads of positives to take into the international break. We'll just check that these deals get over the line and see how things pan out ahead of the deadline. In an ideal world, a last wide attacker would be probably complete the dream window from a Sunderland hierarchy point of view. We'll see if that happens. But yeah, positivity both on and off the pitch.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As I said, do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because you'll get notified next time we go live later today. And keep your eyes on the Northern Echo and We Are Sunderland on the pages and on the social channels throughout the day, because we've got live blogs running. We'll obviously bring you the news and the analysis live as it happens. And we'll be back later today. Thanks for watching. Take care.